Hey there, welcome to episode 6 of Beauty Behind the Brand Live. I am your host, Elle Jones, and I'm super excited to have you here with us for another week of this 12-part episode live docu-series that is streaming all across the globe on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, as well as Facebook and YouTube. And it is because of you that we are making it happen week after week after week. My production team and I are so thrilled to have you joining us for this very, very special episode with an incredible woman that I absolutely adore. I have known her for many, many years, and I've had the pleasure of working with her in a variety of different capacities, as well as her being my client, but just seeing her flourish and blossom into something so incredibly powerful and amazing. I can't wait for you to experience her beauty and her brilliance, the beauty behind the brand, Victoria Fry. So without further ado, let's welcome our next guest. Victoria Fry is a wife, mother, former HR diversity professional, fitness model, consultant, and the founder of Black Lotus Sanctuary, a nonprofit wellness collective. As a lupus survivor and warrior who supports women and underserved, undervalued, and unappreciated populations, Victoria creates and holds space for people to feel free and safe in their movements and expressions, ushering in transformational healing that supports their emotional, mental, and physical health. Listen, if you didn't get excited by that, I don't know what's going to wake and shake you, but I want to share a little bit more about our special guest. She is coming. But I just want to talk a little bit about, while we're waiting on Victoria, I'm going to talk a little bit about why this topic is so important. No matter where you're tuning in from, chances are the likelihood of you not being impacted in some way by the things that have been going on in our world as of late for the last several months, more specifically with the coronavirus, and then, the continuous racial injustice that we keep seeing in this country. It takes a traumatic toll on us emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And so I thought it was really important to have a conversation around how we can begin to heal while we're still on the front lines in our own unique and very special ways to not only help us heal, because if we don't take care of ourselves, then we can't fight for anything or anyone. Right? We can't use our voices for anything or for anyone. And so it's super important that we lean in to learn the best way to care for ourselves on every single level so that we can continue to show up powerfully and fight this fight, because we will win this fight. And that's the fight against everything: sickness, disease, injustice, everything that would come to really keep us bound and stuck and stagnant. We're going to win, but we got to make sure that we're taking care of our emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual wellness in the process. And our very lovely guest, Victoria, is going to talk to us today about her practices as a wellness and healthcare professional and how we can begin to do that in a very real and tangible way. So thank you all. Welcome our guest, Victoria. Hey there.
Hi.
How are you, beautiful?
I'm great. God is good.
Absolutely. All the time. All the time. So you're ready to dig into this conversation so we can learn from your expertise and your wisdom and your years of more than 30 years experience in the health and wellness industry, not only as a teacher, but a fitness model, a consultant, and also a diversity and inclusion professional, which I'm sure you've been able to apply those practices to the health and wellness industry as well. So let's talk about why you are doing the work that you're doing right now. Why did you transition from HR work to the health and wellness industry?
So actually there's simultaneous, right? So I'm still in HR, I'm still in the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. But what I found was there was a need because I've always been in the health and wellness. I've always been in the fitness industry for over 30 years. I think since this is 2020, it's probably going on 4 decades, but I won't say I got right out of high school and got into it right out of high school. So what I saw was there was a nexus between the two, actually, and the lack thereof, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Of course, as most people know, you see the images you see are not people who look like us. And if you think about 30 plus years ago, it definitely more now. And I'm not just talking about the melanin. I'm not talking about the color. I'm talking about size, types of bodies, able bodies, because all bodies are able, right? There wasn't a on people who may take a little bit more thought in these group fitness classes or personal training or whatever the case may be. Now it is, even before the pandemic and all the injustices. But mind you, the injustices have always happened 400 years. And so that's kind of how I got into it. First, I was in a fitness, but I was thinking the other day, I said, how did I start? I actually started in civil rights in the compliance field, and it morphed into diversity, equity, and inclusion. When I was a freshman in college, I actually came home and did a summer job. Had a summer job, and it was with a state agency, and it was the Office of Civil Rights. Of course, then I wasn't aware that that's what the work I was doing or helping in the summer. And that chief of that office became a very impactful mentor for me. And it wasn't until I started working for the federal government and I was asked to be a EEO investigator that it clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, when I was 18, I was doing this work, or I was helping to do this work. So that's kind of how it started.
Listen, you are a real G. You are bringing gems and years of knowledge. Just the fact I'm always in awe of you, but just the fact that you've been really consistent in finding a way to not only ensure that you personally are healthy, emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, but leveraging those skills and all of your experience and helping other people to do the same. And we see a lot of what's going on. We're not immune to it at all. You teach all over the world, all over the country, and you teach different audiences, but you also have a love for and a focus on underserved and underprivileged communities. Tell us what it's been like to teach in this way in this season with everything that's going on. What are some of the things that you feel
It's
are coming
buffering.
up? Yeah, it's buffering. What are some of the things that you feel are coming up for you or your students when you're teaching them? And guys, while we're waiting, make sure that you get your questions ready because we're going to have a Q&A with Victoria at the end. No worries, we're going to keep this going, right? But I think that it's important for us to really be transparent and peel back the layers and talk about the things that are bothering us, the things that are really, my co-producer and I were talking several weeks ago, and we talked about this on episode 5 because she was actually the featured guest on episode 5. But we talked about how we felt so paralyzed by the events of what's been going on. It was just like this mounting pressure and just this overwhelming feeling where eventually we just kind of buckled, and it was already one thing dealing with the coronavirus and just everyone having to adjust to a new way of living, even if temporary, adjusting to a new normal, trying to discover things, new ways to live while also discovering things about ourselves. And then as it seemed that we were kind of coming to the tail end of COVID-19, then we step into yet another tragic season where we are seeing Black people literally murdered and taken away from us and treated very cruelly. And it hasn't stopped. That's why we're going to continue to have these conversations, because it has not stopped. It continues. It didn't stop with George Floyd. Yes, there was some progress made, but it's small progress, and you can't forget that a little bit of progress doesn't resolve the whole thing. It's a step in the right direction, but we've got a long fight and journey ahead of ourselves. And so, how do we navigate through that? So, what I'm going to do is open it up for questions. If any of you have questions, I'm going to go ahead and take those questions now. We're going to wait for Victoria. I believe she is having technical difficulties, but that's okay. It's par for the course. We are doing this live, we're streaming. Things happen. We see it all the time. Hopefully, you all don't come here to expect perfection, but you do expect authenticity and transparency and impact. And that's what we're going to continue to provide to you week after week. So I'm going to go ahead and look in the questions. If you have any, go ahead and drop them. And it could be about what we've been doing with the show, where we're at, the direction that we're headed in, and also questions that you want to prepare to ask Victoria. And I'll go ahead and line those up. So I'm going to go ahead and look in the questions and in the comments. And if we have no questions, we're going to just keep going. I'm going to go with the flow. So I'm going to put this comment up because I think it's very important. The awesome task of healing yourself mentally and physically, it's on you. Y'all, that is very powerful. I don't even need to read the rest of that. It is so important that we take ownership of our own healing. We take ownership of our own self-care, because if we aren't doing it, how do we expect for anyone else to do it? We can't wait on anyone else to do it, right? And, as I was saying just a little while ago when I was talking about my co-executive producer, Latasha Kennedy, and I, it was really, really difficult to it was really difficult to get past or learn how to move beyond the paralysis that we were feeling. It was really, really hard. So we almost became stuck. And I don't know, have you ever felt that way, where something so devastating and detrimental has happened that you just feel stuck? You don't know how you're going to get out of it. Part of what we need to do, and part of the things that my partners and I have done, is leaning on one another. Part of self-care and wholeness and wellness is reaching out to your community, being okay with admitting and saying, I'm not okay, and reaching out for support. A lot of times we feel like we're on an island by ourselves and no one can relate, and nothing could be further from the truth. Sometimes there are other people who are going through the same journey as us, and like us, they're waiting on someone to say, hello, hey, I'm right here. I can relate. Because when we do that, then we don't feel so isolated and alone. We feel like we have community around us and we're kind of just going through it together. I believe that's what COVID-19 did, is that we were all experiencing this devastating thing alongside each other. Nothing separated any of us, not class, not social class, not economic status. Nothing separated us in that moment. And it caused us to really look inward and say, I've got to do better about taking care of myself, and not just, eating right or exercising and getting enough proper rest, but looking at the other areas of our lives that we need to take care of as well. So continue to post your questions and comments. I thank you so much for all of your love and support. We have Victoria back on, and there you are. It's okay. It is okay.
Absolutely.
Kind of continue to navigate through this. We know that you have a powerful message to share with us today. And so we will adjust accordingly as we need to.
Yeah.
So the question that I was asking you was, what do you see coming up right now? You're working with women as well as underserved communities, and that includes children, young ladies, and young men. what has it been like? You've had to adjust, number one, to teaching because you couldn't hold your classes in person like you were used to. Now things are opening back up for you in your area. But what was it like trying to adjust to this whole coronavirus era? And what was the impact that you were seeing from your students and partners? And then tell us the impact that you've been seeing as a result of this civil unrest that we've
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So you had to pivot, honestly. You had to think about um, the best way to serve the people that you normally serve. And so we know the groups, the populations that I serve typically don't have, and I won't say typically, but they have a harder difficulty in accessing internet connectivity, like I just did, and or having laptops or things of that nature. And so most of my classes for the last 2.5 months um, have been on Zoom, have been live streamed, and that's totally different type of teaching than many instructors or coaches have had to do. And so it serves some people. I have some friends in the fitness industry that do similar work that that's not for me. And I applauded them for that because it is a skill set. I love teaching live. I love being able to connect. And so I had to find other ways to connect, but that's life, right? So you had to find other ways to connect with the individuals that you serve. And I look at it as if I'm a servant, and I am. I know that the pieces and parts that I do in these fields are anointed. I don't care what anybody else says. I know that that's my mission and my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So teaching live is my heart, but certainly I've learned to do on live stream. And so now that things are opening up a little bit here in Ohio, we're having classes outside, and I love being outside. I'm a nature girl, thanks to my father. And so teaching outside. So one of the modalities that I teach is called Urban Zen Integrative Therapy. And it is a modality. It has 5 parts, and it assists in healing, and it assists in grounding and movement and essential oils and all these wonderful modalities. And actually, we had, and I partnered with 2 other beautiful ladies. We all went through the training together, Beth and Tiara, and we had our first class a couple weeks ago on Sunday evening out in the park, and there were like 58 people, men and women. It was so amazing under outside in nature, hearing the birds. We were able to lead them in body awareness meditation and body movement, and offer essential oils and so many other things in Reiki. And so it was 58 people, and so we had it again last weekend, and it was about half of that. But just to know, we called it self-care is rebellion. Right?
And what does that mean? When you talk about self-care being rebellion, help our audience understand what that means, because we typically relate rebellion to like chaos and just disrupting stuff, which is not always a bad thing. Let's talk about how that applies to our health.
So when we say that, often, especially for women, that's the last thing we do. Right? We're caring for everyone else. We're doing everything for everyone else. And we often leave ourselves last in self-care. Be it just sitting, be it just grounding your feet, being it just meditating or praying. We leave that last. So in essence, what we're saying is self-care is rebellious, and it's okay. Like, you're first, you're number one. It's just like being on a plane. What they say, if you have kids or someone that can't care for themselves, you're not going to put the oxygen on them first, right? Because you got to help them. You're going to put it on yourself. So you're going to self-care first, which is rebellion, right? which is rebellious because that's not what we're taught.
So what are 2 steps or 3 steps that what does that look like in practice? So give us like 3 key things that we can do to put those things in practice.
So one of the things that you can do is find time for yourself. My amazing mother told me early on, before I got married years and years ago, always find time for yourself, right? Find time for yourself, and whatever that means. It doesn't always necessarily mean you got to go get a pedicure or manicure or anything to that nature. It could mean that you just sit on the porch and enjoy what's in front of you, right? So that could be one thing that doesn't take a lot of effort. Maybe it's just eating something you've been wanting to eat. Maybe it's that ice cream if you're not lactose intolerant, right? Maybe it's almond ice cream, whatever the case may be, finding that one thing that brings you joy, right? Whatever that is. Maybe it's just singing. Maybe it's movement. For me, a lot of times it's movement. I move, I dance, I do yoga, all those things. So those are some of the things you can do. Simple.
What are some of the, so let's get more into the yoga practice, because when we talk about you being a wellness expert, a health and wellness expert, but your specialty and focus is yoga.
Yeah.
So give us like 2 of your favorite yoga poses. I'm probably using the wrong terminology. But give us 2 of your favorite yoga moves and the reason for them. Like, what is the effect of doing those 2?
Yeah. So oftentimes for me, it's heart openers. And in yoga, a lot of times there's conversation about chakras, and I don't want to really get into that. We can, but there's 7 energy centers in your body, and the heart is one. And so because I'm such a heart-centered person, and I know that, and you can take all kind of tests, all kind of personality tests, all kind of things to identify what your focus is. And so mine is heart. So anything that opens the heart, and there's so many poses that does that. And oftentimes, sometimes when I'm just in meditation, I'm just holding my heart, right? And closing my eyes. So anything that opens the heart is a favorite of mine. And typically when I do any pose, it could be Trikonasana, triangle. It could be a warrior pose.
I gotta stop you in the Trikonasana. I feel like I'm about to say the name of a dinosaur. Slow it down. Say the name again and then tell us what it is.
Okay, so it's Trikonasana.
Okay.
Okay. Mm-hmm. It's Sanskrit. It means triangle. And so you make a triangle with your body. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So your right hand is on or left hand, it doesn't matter. It's going to be hard for me to describe. I should act like I'm cueing a class and maybe it'll come easier. Right hand on the floor, and your left leg lifts. So it's almost like you're making a triangle. So that's the easiest part without me getting up and showing you, right? So I'm not going to do that. But
I know you want to, y'all. She wants to. She gets to move, honey. She is moving.
So it's that simple. And warrior poses. Warrior 1, 2, and 3. I'm not going to use Sanskrit. Warrior 1, 2, and 3 are great as well. And those are balancing poses, and and then you can reach up. So you reach up and you ground, right? So you can reach up and ground your feet. So those are some of my faves.
Thank you for sharing those with us.
You're welcome.
I was like, I know she is itching to get out of her seat. In a minute, y'all gonna get a full-on demonstration. So. But I want to keep in mind, like, be mindful of the fact that we do have audience members who just don't know, and so I want them, and they'll ask questions that they have, obviously, but just to break it down to them. I have friends that sometimes they say, "Stop talking industry speak." Like, what? Speak to me like I'm in kindergarten, so I understand.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, what do you feel like has been? Well, let's talk about your point of view of wellness as a whole and being a Black woman in wellness first. What has your experience been like, and what are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome as a Black woman in the wellness industry?
Yeah, that's a good one. I especially believe I would have to break it down. So when I first started, so many moons ago, there was no one that looked like me. I mean, no one, right? And when I say look like me, I mean color. And being that I was a darker complected woman, um, or body shape or body size, right? Everybody was blonde, white, real thin, those type of things. So that was some of the challenges I had at the beginning. And I didn't let it stop me. Sure, I was upset. Sure, I was mad. But I knew, just like our ancestors, that someone had to go for it. And I wasn't a martyr at all. Honestly, I was a little hard headed. And if it's something I want to do, I'm going to do it some kind of way. And so those were some of the challenges. So you had to try out a lot back then, and you do, even in the yoga community, have to do that as well. So I had to hone my skills, um, like to the nth degree. I had to hone my skills, and I got a lot of no's. I did, but I didn't stop trying. And how different is that from anything else that Black people experience? And so, yeah, that's what it was. I just kept going. And then I found my people, my tribe.
Mm-hmm.
You got
it. Is that tribe all inclusive, or is it more Black women? Like, how many Black women do you even see in your industry? Or because we know most likely it's probably predominantly white. So I know that you do a lot of work and initiatives centered around bringing more women of color to the forefront. But, what is that like, being one of the few in the industry as a Black woman, and how do you continue to push through? And you said, find your community, find your tribe. And what does that tribe look like for you today?
Yeah. So before the tribe, right, mostly when I first started out, was white women that had a sense, for whatever reason. I'm not even going to try to really understand or try to evaluate what the reason was. I always looked at them at the beginning, 30 plus years ago, as co-conspirators, right? So not necessarily allies, but co-conspirators that are going to be in the circle with me to advocate, right? And so early on, now, I'm so happy. There's more and more. And here where I live, there's a push, and it's a beautiful push. There are so many people of color, specifically Black people, who are certified yoga teachers. And they're doing some big things. And I try to support each and every one of them. And so I'm so glad to see that.
Yeah.
And there's so many more people practicing.
Mm-hmm. And that's good. We need more representation across the board in all industries. And so that's one of the reasons why I was really excited for our viewers, our audience, to get to meet you, is because typically when we are seeing health and wellness on a larger scale, and especially yoga as a focus, it is not women of color that we see. That's not to say that there aren't women of color doing it, but we don't see that as often as we do with other women. So what is your point of view about the importance of wellness and the impact that has come, the traumatic impact that has come from living through the coronavirus COVID-19 era, as well as the murders of George Floyd and so many others, even since his death?
Yeah. So what I'm finding is that even with my own trauma, right, is that it just keeps bringing it up, because we know that trauma actually affects your physical, right, body and your mind. And so with my experiences that I've had in the past with law enforcement, having a Black husband, Black sons, bunches of Black male first cousins, I've seen it basically majority of my life, right? The injustices with those type of things, and they were pretty violent at times. And so for me, just seeing those things over and over and over again, I've had to recognize and tell my body and ground myself that that's not my situation, but it also validates the reason why I feel the way I feel regarding, law enforcement or injustices, which is why I've probably gone into this work, right? And married the two, the wellness and the diversity and the equity and the inclusion. So
What's the impact of the wellness on, like, what impact have you seen as it pertains to the people that you work with, their emotional, physical, mental, and spiritual wellness as a result of these things? What are you seeing?
What's the impact? I think that people on wellness, what I've noticed is that with the people that I work with, is that they are less grounded, less assured. They're feeling vulnerable. They're not feeling safe. They're questioning, right, what they should do and how they should do it. They're wondering if they're doing the right thing. Like, are they going out to march or protest, or should they stay home? Coronavirus, like, should I wear the mask? I feel suffered, smothered. Like, what should I do and how should I do it? So the impact on wellness is the mental, right, and the physical, because it impacts it all. Like, trauma and stress are two different things. And so it impacts our physical body differently. So the impact has been negative, but it's also, there's a side of it that's positive, because people are finding ways to center and to ground, and to really tell their story and understand how their story is similar or different than what they're experiencing now, and being able to identify that.
I love that. And I love that. And we all have different stories. And that's why I was saying earlier, like, it's so important that we raise our hand and say, hey, I'm not okay. I'm not feeling well. I'm not feeling grounded. I'm feeling off. And in that, what we do is give other people permission to say when they're not okay as well. And like you said, we find our community, and it's through community and knowing that we're not alone is how we can begin to step into the healing process, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh, and I think so, and then finding your voice, like, that's huge, right? And so your voice may not necessarily be your voice, what you say. It may be what you do.
Yeah.
And so being able to assist people, and even to keep finding my voice, right? Being able to assist people in finding their voice, and following their own voice. So just because, your siblings are out marching, and you don't think that's part of your anointing or your mission or your purpose, doesn't mean you have to go do it. There's other things we can do. There's so many levels of activism and advocacy that you got to find the one that is your passion, that suits you and suits your voice and your heart, and your mission.
I love that. It's evident that you are a believer, right? And so let's talk a little bit about the stigma, if you will, or some of the ideas and beliefs around what yoga practice really is.
Oh my gosh.
And some of the things that you have experienced firsthand being a Christian or a believer who practices and teaches yoga. What has that been like?
So, that's such a good question. And so many of my yoga family of color, and many that are not, we talk about this quite often, right? And so there's always questions, not so much as it was in the beginning for me, which was 10 years ago when I started teaching, about 10 years when I started teaching yoga. There was a lot of questions about, isn't it, satanic? Isn't it Buddhism? Well, sure, all that stuff came from India, but it also came from Africa. And so I had to do a deep dive research about, okay, let me see where these cross. And so, yeah, there's always questions. But I'm happy to say that I have taught yoga classes in many a church to senior citizens who are typically the ones that identify that it may not be Christian or appropriate. So what's happening is they're identifying, and what I try to talk about is the benefits of yoga, right? You don't have to chant, right? When you go into meditation, you can pray. You don't have to do, the things that don't, if it doesn't feel good to you, don't do it, right? I mean, I've taught classes where people wear booty shorts, okay? It's just a thing.
For yoga? Okay.
Yes.
Like, what's
primal yoga. Yeah. I mean, there's a primal yoga that I teach and I've taught for a long time where there's, sports bras and booty shorts like that. Booty shorts. That doesn't mean they're athletic shorts, but that doesn't mean that it's not yoga.
Yeah.
Right. There's all kind of forms of yoga, and this is my mantra: movement is medicine. So if you're moving, it can heal, right? And it also allows you to find your voice as well. So that's always a good thing. It's always a good
thing. That. That's a quotable for sure. Movement is medicine.
Yeah.
I love to hear what our guests have to say, because for sure they're going to at least one time drop one bomb quotable that we can all live by. And so I love that movement is medicine.
Yeah.
And I love that you are breaking stereotypes and also really teaching people it's about doing what feels good to you.
Absolutely.
You're opening yourself up to a different way of doing things, right? And so just because it's done this way doesn't mean that you have to adopt every single piece of that thing. Fitness is fitness, wellness is wellness, and you have to be very clear on who you are and what your core values are, right? So I absolutely love that. This show is called Beauty Behind the Brand. And one of the reasons why I was very, very passionate and still am very passionate about this project and doing this work is really spotlighting women like you who are powerhouses, brilliant women, leaders in the community and in business, cultivating change and being catalysts for so many different things that most people don't get to see or hear from often, right? But another part to the Beauty Behind the Brand is also about not just looking at the successes and the beautiful parts of the work that you do, but also peeling back the layers even more and talking about some of the challenges that you've had to overcome and really being transparent about them and where you are today. So you've talked about, being a health and wellness expert for pretty much the majority of your life, right? Coming out of high school. And you've talked about being one of the few women of color in a specific practice within the health and wellness industry. You've also talked a little bit about your age. So now we're going to talk, the first thing we're going to dig into is that Miss Victoria, y'all, is a fitness model. And I want you to talk to us about how old you were when you became a fitness model and how that all came about, ma'am.
That is so interesting, right? Like, I was surprised in that I probably was 50. And so I had a girlfriend who worked for this agency, and they were looking for Black women between, I was younger than 50, 45, and I think it was 55. Okay. For this project they had in another state for a wellness center. And so, she's like, Victoria, you're perfect for this. I'm like, not me.
And because why? Why not me?
I know, right? Because I had just finished. They wanted a runner, and I used to run. I ran in college and I ran in high school, but I hadn't, because I had an injury not maybe a year before that, and I was like, what am I going to have to be doing? And wasn't quite sure, but they had me running across this stage, taking these pictures while I was running. And I swear I ran 20 miles that day. And I was like, how am I going to be able to do this when I haven't ran in so long? And of course, God made it happen. And I think they came out pretty good. I was like, is that me? Oh my goodness.
Came out wonderful. So for those of you who don't know, Victoria is also a client of mine. I know the work that we have done for her. She's confident. She's a brilliantly confident woman. There's no question about that. But much like many of the women that I work with, they're confident. They know their stuff. Like they don't need anyone to teach them how to do what they're experts in. It's about showing up and
Yeah.
showcasing that expertise in a confident way. And that was one of the things that I had the complete honor and privilege of work. I was trying to say privilege and pleasure of working with her on, and to see the things that she's accomplished. And she just continues to keep going and going and going. And I think that that's a testament to why it's so important to make sure that we are whole, like we have a holistic approach to our wellness, right? And no matter what. And again, digging into, we all have stuff.
Oh,
We all have stuff that we have to work through. We many of us have experienced personal, upfront and in your face trauma. We've experienced discrimination, we've experienced loss, we've experienced sickness. So I want with each guest for our viewers to really lean in and be able to see themselves in our guest story. So talk to us a little bit about your own personal health journey. One big challenge that you've had to overcome and where you are today with that.
yeah. So one of the challenges that I had was being diagnosed with lupus. And so I had been healthy all my life. You know, as you've heard, I've been in the fitness industry for a long time, and I was diagnosed a long time ago, but I never had any problems with lupus. And then probably about, I don't know, 7 years ago or so, my husband and I, who I've been married to forever, uh, went to a festival. He's an entrepreneur, and so I was helping with his booth. The next morning, I was getting stiff like that evening because it was a long day. And the next morning, I got up and I couldn't get out of bed, literally. Like I couldn't stand up. I went to stand up to go to the restroom and I fell. And I literally stayed in the bed probably because it was the weekend, maybe 2 days till I could get to my doctor. I had completely forgotten that I was diagnosed with lupus years ago. And so I didn't know what was wrong. I was so scared. I didn't know. I thought I had a virus. I thought I had this or that. I was Googling, don't Google. And coming up with all this stuff, you know, I was crawling to the restroom. I mean, I just couldn't walk. I couldn't move. Joints were hurting, everything. And so when I finally went to my primary care physician, they were coming up with all this stuff, and it was a different person by this time. And they were like, wait a minute. He said something about lupus. And I said, lupus? I said, oh my goodness, I was diagnosed with lupus years ago. And so they did all the testing again, and that's what it was. So that was a huge challenge for me. I thought my life was over. I thought that I wouldn't be able to teach again. I thought that, you know, I was going to have all these complications. I had to educate myself about lupus because I didn't before. I'm like, that's not, you know, that's not a problem I'm going to have. And so I had to overcome that while being in the fitness industry. Teaching class, I kept teaching classes. Like who does that? Like I was so focused about being a, not that I was a necessarily a role model. That wasn't my thing, but to be able to serve my community, I kept teaching.
Well, that goes back to what you were saying before about how we are showing up for everyone else, but as women in particular, we put our mask on last. So even when there are things going on with us, most women don't want to let anyone know what they're dealing with and what they're feeling physically, right? It's a sign of weakness, so to speak. And even as women, we should
Mhm.
have that space to, it shouldn't even be seen as a weakness, but
Yeah.
that's pretty much the mentality. And like you said, I'm in the fitness industry. And so what
Mhm.
what was that like having to one come to grips with, okay, I have to adjust in some ways, obviously, because I have to
Mhm.
be more mindful of my health and where I'm at. But then was there this fear, or was there any fear at all around sharing the fact that you had lupus, and what type of impact have you seen on your career in the fitness industry, if any at all?
Yeah. So what I decided to do, and we talked about doing the work, the personal work. I decided to do the personal work. I'm like, I'm out here, I'm telling folks, A, B, and C. I need to do it myself. So I learned to tell my story. It freed me to be able to tell my story, because what I found was there were so many others. It might not have been lupus, but it was so many other things. Um, and it gave people hope, and we connected, and they were still my people, and we supported one another. So you've got to tell your story. First, you got to sit in it and recognize it, and know that it's not an Achilles heel. It's not the end. All the things that I thought when it came back up when I was had a lupus flare. You gotta understand that that's not the end. And my husband helped with me a lot with that. He's like, that's not the end. And so you got to sit in it. You've got to research it. Right? You can't just say, "Oh my gosh, I've only heard what the media said about lupus." And then you have to change how you think, how you eat, right? How you move. And then you got to learn to say no.
Mm-hmm.
You got to say no. Like, that's not, I can't do that.
A
And it
complete,
doesn't mean that you're weak.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And like you said, it's sharing your story, and
Mm-hmm.
knowing that when you share your story isn't just about you.
Mm-hmm.
It is about you, but it's not for you. It's for the other people who can see
Yeah.
themselves, some part of themselves in your story. And so I applaud you for sharing that, because it's super important. And you not only do work with those in the lupus community, I mean, incredible work. You just recently hosted a 5-day or 7-day challenge last month, which was Lupus Awareness Month,
Uh-huh.
with some incredibly amazing women.
Yeah.
You also support the cancer and sickle cell community. So tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about the work that you're doing in both of those communities as well, and how you're supporting patients.
So, for sickle cell, I've always been an advocate for sickle cell, even before I identified that I was diagnosed with lupus, because I'm an affected family member. What that means is sickle cell anemia and disease runs in my family. So I have siblings that have sickle cell. So I've always been their advocate. So I've always been um, supporting the underdog, because oftentimes with their crises and things of that nature, and I got that from my parents. My parents are so much those people. I was their voice. And so that's why I have no problem saying what I need to say, especially when people are in pain. And they're suffering, and they're underserved and underprivileged. And so the work I've done in sickle cell, I've been a part of the board of sickle cell, advisory group actually, of sickle cell for Central Ohio. And I did that for years. And as a result of that, I was on the board of the Central Ohio Red Cross, where I was on the blood donor side on the board. And I was the chair of the Diversity Leadership Council for the American Red Cross. And that was to recruit people who were like-minded to
Mhm.
donate blood. And then cancer research, I just did an event last year, and they asked me to come back this year. Hopefully we'll be able to have it, for raising funds for cancer research.
Yes, I love that. Love it. I love everything about it. That's why I keep saying it. And it's just incredibly important work. If you or someone lives with a chronic illness, you understand the importance of just different, making sure that you're at optimal health as much as possible, but also using your voice, but then having others close to you, whether it's a family member or a close friend or someone in your community who will raise their voice to help support you as well. And so I believe that is just incredibly impactful work that you're doing, as well as working with children.
Mm-hmm.
Going into the inner city and working with, like you said, those underserved, underprivileged communities where they may not otherwise get any exposure to really valuable health programs to focus on how to become more healthy and live healthier lives. And so that I don't know how you do it. You're always doing so much with lupus. And I think, it's a blessing to see, but it's also kind of like a catch 22 because then people who know you have lupus see you doing what you're doing. And then they think, oh, if she can do it, then the other person that I know has lupus can do it too.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
each person's journey is
Yeah.
really unique and different to them. And just because you see someone doing something doesn't mean that it doesn't come with a cost, without a cost.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We are going to get into Q&A if we have one. We have an incredible comment from Dr. Sajay Price. Movement is medicine for real. It has helped me tremendously. I would love to hear from our audience about how the coronavirus and everything else that's been going on has had an impact on your health in this season. What questions do you have for Victoria? And what are some of the things that you found to be really helpful for you to kind of just make sure that you're emotionally balanced as much as possible so that you can continue to take care of yourself? And while we're waiting on those questions to come in, I want you to share a little bit with us about what Black Lotus Sanctuary is and how people can get involved in the movement to support you.
So Black Lotus Sanctuary, I came up with Black Lotus Sanctuary, and there's meaning behind that. I have my t-shirt on. Yes. And the Black Lotus Sanctuary was established. It's a nonprofit, and it was established to serve those communities we've been talking about all day, to facilitate movement, opportunities in those communities for people who don't necessarily get those kind of opportunities. And it's a general overall description because it houses all the stuff I've been talking about. So, but women are a big part of it. Where I live in Ohio, there is a huge human trafficking problem. Mm-hmm. And so some of the things that Black Lotus has been able to do is to serve that community.
And how are you helping them with the human trafficking?
It's just with healthcare products,
okay.
Those type of things, without asking questions and trying to find out what's going on. Sometimes they just need to come and pick up some feminine products, right? Mm-hmm. And I work with a lot of other agencies, and then just social emotional support. Mm-hmm. As well. So Black Lotus is kind of this umbrella of all the things. And it's a collective, honestly. So it's not a collaboration, it's a collective. So oftentimes I'll work with other groups that have similar purposes, mm-hmm. and we work collectively to do something as opposed to collaborating.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And a couple brief sentences. Tell us how non-Black women and men can become more impactful allies to Black women and men in the health and wellness industry.
Oh, goodness. Okay. So, and this question has come up so many times over the last 2 months or last month and a half. And what I've been saying is because I'm exhausted, and so are many of my brothers and sisters, melanated brothers and sisters. You have to do the work. You got to find out what it is you can do. And so allies are great. I mean, you can put on put up posts and all those things, but you need to have action, right? We have a lot of folks and a lot of companies that say, oh, this is our stance on Black Lives Matter. Okay, but where's the action, right? So if you don't have the action,
what's one action step that they can take today
so they can
people in your community?
They can support groups that support Black people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it could be money, it could be energy, it could be time, it could be whatever. You can hire more diverse individuals, be it in the fitness industry or in corporations, which I work in as well. You can hire people that are representative of the communities you're trying to serve, or those that aren't, right? You got to show your support.
Mm-hmm.
You could be a co-consultant